In the name of God who calls us into truth. Amen.
Amen.
In the progression of the church here, we come to Lent once again, and for me at least, Lent is a very rich time. It's like no other time in the church here because it's very deliberately gives us a space of weeks in which to see how we're going to make our way to the Jerusalem to which Jesus walks in the stories that are part of Lent. Going to Jerusalem in order to find that for which we yearn so much, a new life, a new kind of fulfillment, but knowing full well that there are many obstacles on the way. So Lent for me is a special time, and I personally always like to find a theme for myself, for meditation or for contemplation. And this year I happened to pick up not long ago Alan Jones's wonderful book, Living the Truth. And for me, therefore, that became, as I looked through it, my theme for this year. And I'd like to share some of that this morning with you. It's a moment of truth at the beginning of Lent and a moment of truth at its end. These are from the Scripture, and they mark the beginning and the end of Jesus' final journey, his pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The first one is the story we hear in the Gospel of today. It's out of chronology, but that's typical of the Gospels. Jesus is, once he has been identified as God's beloved, he is sent into the wilderness, and there he is confronted with the test that every human being is confronted with as one grows up, and that is the test of identity. Just who am I, and why am I here, and who am I to serve? It's a remarkable time of truth-telling for Jesus. The temptations or the tests are those that are very human, and it is the humanity of Jesus that is revealed in his refusal to act like God, or to serve mammon rather than God, to serve a false kind of God. It's this humanity in Jesus with whom we can so much identify and with whom we walk the road to Jerusalem. And the other moment of truth that occurs to me is in his confrontation with Pilate. Jesus says, I came to bear witness to the truth. And Pilate's answer is, what is truth? And people don't like Pilate, and so they think it's always a very cynical kind of response. It may not have been a cynical response. It may have been the response of one who thinks. Because if you think about it, the question, what is truth, is a crucial question and not a simple one. Some centuries ago, René Descartes told us that I think, therefore I am. And that led into a whole bunch of centuries of rationalisms and also an exaltation of the intellect, which was not so much a bad thing, except that there were other answers that were truthful. Why didn't he say, I breathe, therefore I am? Why didn't he say, I love and I hate, I trust and I fear, therefore I am? There were lots of ways he could have answered that question. In his context, this was the answer he gave: a philosopher, a metaphysician, I think, therefore I am. But the kind of truth that Jesus is talking about, and I think even the kind of truth that Pilate was asking about, is not the truth that's up here. It's a deeper truth. It's a more holistic truth, if you like. What is the wholeness of truth? Alan Jones says in his writings that He thinks that's something we all yearn for, to embody, as Jesus did, truth. What could he have meant by that? Well, he meant something that Mr. Honest was talking about when he, in the Pilgrim's Progress, he says, I want to be what my name says I am. To be authentic, to be wholly who I am, to be transparent from top to bottom, from heel to toe to the forehead and the hair, from the innermost to the outermost, to be that which I profess to be, by which my name is, honest. So authenticity, integrity, wholeness. These are all the words that are, in a way, if not exact synonyms, close to being synonyms for this kind of truth. Alan Jones says, truth is something I want to become. I love that. But how do we do that? Where does this journey begin? And that's a question that I really ask every one of us, as I ask myself, where does my journey today, on this 9th of March, 2014, where does my journey begin? We read Scripture because Scripture, in a way, is an avenue for us to self-understanding. We lead our lives, again, the way countless human beings have lived their lives. And Scripture is written as a story between two gardens. The garden that we read about in the lesson this morning from Genesis, the Garden of Eden, the garden between the rivers, the garden of innocence. And as the story tells us, the Jews, in taking this story and turning it into a deep myth about the origins of human nature, said that from the very beginning, we could not live in innocence and be fully human. Don't blame the snake. Blame God. God gave us capacities, and it is perhaps a failing of that myth that the myth would suggest that we were not to live up to our capacities. It was a necessity that we be thrown out of the garden of innocence. Innocence in human life lasts perhaps for the first 5 minutes out of the womb. I'm guessing. The first time the baby cries and doesn't get what he or she wants, there is a loss of some innocence somehow. And it compounds. I'll never forget the time I came home from school because my teacher was angry at me for something I had done. And I said to my dad, I don't feel very well. I don't want to go back to school this afternoon. I'm feeling sick. Like God, Father looked at me and said, what happened this morning? And so he said, back to school, the lie and the truth. So we begin with the story that we embody, whoever we are, wherever we are in our life. And you know, this story is full of wonderful things, and it's full of things we would like to hide. Our failings, our senses of inadequacy, our deceptions, and most all of them begin with how we treat ourselves. This journey must begin with ourselves. It inevitably will lead us beyond ourselves because we all yearn in truth for our connectedness to our brothers and sisters in this world. But it must begin with ourselves. The Greek word for truth is aletheia, and it means the uncovering of the lies. Actually, the uncovering of the forgetfulness, The word lithos was a word that had to do in Greek with forgetfulness. And forgetfulness was the greatest obstacle one could have to fulfillment. One was bound to be born again and again and again, as long as one forgot what one should have learned. So to be truthful is to uncover the lies, the deceptions, the failings. And in the uncovering comes a revelation. So truth has to do with revelation. What am I about to see? So often it is in the very depths of our problems that we see the best. Some time ago I preached that sermon about the apple tree, and we're going to be singing again in the anthem today, the apple tree. Well, the apple tree, Dennis Potter, who was a playwright and who got painfully and terribly sick and on his deathbed, looked out his window at an apple blossom and said, "That's not just an apple blossom. That's the most wonderful, beautiful, fullest apple blossom I have ever seen." He said, "Oh, the wondrousness of now," because all he had was now. A revelation, a moment of immense truth for him. We all yearn for that kind of truth, perhaps without the pain and the nearness of death. But we are always closer to death than we know. As was Jesus on his road to Jerusalem. He didn't know he was going to die there. That's the construct of the story, written long afterwards. But he knew there would be a confrontation. And in that sense of urgency, no doubt, he was searching for and recognizing in himself the truth of who he was and what his purpose in life was. So, this journey is a hard journey if we take it seriously. Because to embody the truth is from the head to the toe, from the innermost to the outermost part of our being, to be in harmony, to be transparent. Alan Jones in another place says, "What is it I would most like living in the truth?" He says, "It is to give myself to another in a completely unguarded way, to have nothing to hide, but aletheia, to be totally uncovered." It's a hard road. For Jesus, it led to the cross. And one must understand that the cross was the only way, in one form or another, the cross as death, the cross as apparent humiliation, the death as the loss of self, one kind of self, was the only way for the deeper, fuller, total self of Jesus to emerge, timeless, for all of us. The archetype for you and for me. That's why Easter is always at the end of Lent. It's why Lent exists, because it takes us to new life. But to get there, to get to this moment of supreme truth for ourselves, is the road we all must walk. Amen.